Okay, so it looks like people are still signing on, but maybe we can get started and just go through some of the notes and announcements as people are signing on. To the presenters today, just a note, I made you all co-hosts, so I think you should be able to trade off the screens and stuff when you're presenting, but just let me know if you have any problems when we get started. But just in case you saw that your permissions changed, that's what's going on. So we have the meeting notes that Josh put in the chat. If everyone could sign in there, that would be really helpful, just so we know who's joining us today. And if anyone is new and would like to introduce themselves, please feel free. We love to meet new people and learn a little bit about what you do. So that would be great if you feel comfortable. And for those who are just joining, the link to the notes is in the chat. So if you could sign in there, that would be great.
I'm Carl Jones from the MIT Libraries, and I hope you can hear me. I'm very interested in IIIF, and I'm hoping to learn more. We've done some work with IIIF at MIT, but not as much as we hope to do. And so I'm all ears.
Great, thank you for joining. Is there anyone else? I guess I should introduce myself, which I haven't done yet. So rude of me. I'm Meg O'Hearn. I'm the Community and Events Coordinator for the IIIF Consortium. I don't know if anyone else. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Robert Castis. I'm at least new here at the in the IIIF community call. I'm with the Max Planck Institute for History of Science in Berlin, and developer of Digilib image server, and been doing IIIF stuff already for some time, but never managed to come to a IIIF meeting. But I was interested in today's stuff about looking at how Harvard does their infrastructure.
Great, yeah, thank you. I'm glad that you were able to join. And I'm actually really excited myself to hear about the updated infrastructure too. Anyone else who would like to say hello or anything?
Hi, folks. It's been a while since I've seen many of you. Just Frodes at Brown. And yeah, it's been a while since I've been on a community call, so it's great to see y'all.
Great. Yeah, it looks like we have a bunch of people on the call today, so that's really nice to see. Okay, so I think we have some just quick announcements before we get into the presentation. Josh, do you want to do the announcements or?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that since you are doing the more important host duties. So hi, everybody. Yeah, really awesome to see folks joining and lots of new faces. My name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium. And just so we say it, yeah, this is the community call and it's open to everybody. So tell your friends. We do this pretty regularly every 2 weeks unless there's a conflict. Yeah, and we cover stuff like this. So in terms of announcements, the first one is that we have a newsletter coming up. We actually, all credit due to Meg, we've increased the frequency of the newsletter. So it's now roughly monthly, maybe skipping a month or two here and there. But we have enough stuff going on in the community, enough announcements and things like that, it's really rich. And so I just pasted the submission document in there. I think the next one is slated to go out end of next week. Meg, nod if I've gotten that right. Okay, good. I think end of next week is the next one. So usually toward the end of the month. And it's a low bar. If you just fill out that form, we're happy to feature just about anything IIIF related or of interest to the community. So yeah, so get those in. Oh, and Meg makes a great point that submission form is the same each month. So if you don't have something this week, but it comes up next week or in the following weeks, please use that form. So the other quick notes are about kind of upcoming meetings. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we've adjusted, like everyone else has, the way that we do our rhythms and rituals and in-person meetings. We typically have a fall, what we call the working meeting, to kind of gather together and make progress on specs and community aspects and developments. We are going to do the same thing. We're going to do it online. So this year it is scheduled from December 1 to December 3rd. We've just closed the sort of the call for proposals from different groups and community members in terms of what we'll be working on. So that means that with the program committee, we'll be kind of arranging those Lego pieces and figuring out what the schedule will look like for that. But I guess the other thing to mention, to look out for, is that we will do an open call to everybody. A big and popular piece of the working meetings has been kind of these short talks, kind of 7-minute, 8-minute lightning talks, where people have the opportunity to just update on implementations or new works or just radical ideas they want to throw into the mix. So I think we're aiming to get that out early October-ish. So look for that. I think in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, we'll be opening the call for lightning talks, and kind of based on what the response is, then we'll figure out how that fits into the schedule. And then the last piece is just a code of conduct. So that's another community aspect. It's kind of come time to revisit the code of conduct. We've had one in place for a long time, and generally we've had great community workings in the IIIF world, but we want to take another look at it, just make sure that it's up to date and meets kind of current best practices. So we're still looking for a few folks for kind of a limited engagement. This is a great way to help out in the IIIF world if you don't want to join kind of an ongoing committee or working group. If you want to help us, just take a quick look at the code of conduct, the text of it, review it, revise it, and get it up and running again, hopefully in time for the fall working meeting that we're talking about. Just let us know. That you can just drop us an email at staff@iiif.io, or ping any one of us on Slack, and we'd be happy to get you in the fold there. And I think from the IIIF headquarters side, that is all the announcements. But if anyone else wants to mention something or has something that they'd like to announce, by all means, let us know. Now's the time to jump in.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like anyone else has any updates. So yeah, then I guess let's move into the presentations for today. So today we're joined by several staff members of Harvard University, the Harvard University Library. We'll hear from Stu Snydman, Vitaly, Zakuta, Vanessa, Venti, Katie Amaral, and Chris Vicary, I believe. And I think I've made you all present our co-hosts, so let me know if you're having any issues with that. But they're going to talk about their recent IIIF infrastructure redesign, which I mentioned we're really excited to learn about. So I will hand things over to the presenters. Stu, do you want me to hand the presenter duties over to you first?
No, I don't want presenter duties.
Okay.
I'm going to give a brief hello and then hand it off to who's going to present.
I will start, and this is Vitaly, Zakuta, and we'll have also Vanessa, Venti, and Katie Amaral present, but I'll be doing the slides for everybody.
You'll do the slides. Cool. So I'll let Vitaly spin those up whenever he's ready. I want to give a brief, a couple minutes of context, and well, first hello, because it's been a really long time since I've actually attended this call, so I'm really excited to be here and to see a bunch of colleagues, some who I know really well and others who I'm really pleased to see on the call. So I'm Stu Snydman. I'm the Managing Director of Library Technology Services at Harvard University. And yeah, we've got a big team of folks from Harvard on the call, and I'll let the presenters introduce themselves. In addition to the presenters, and I hope I'm gonna get everybody. But I see Rashmi Singhal on the call, which is really exciting because I haven't seen or heard from Rashmi in a while.
I'm back. Yesterday.
She's back. That's so exciting. Yeah. So Rashmi had a big moment in her life, and it was really exciting to see Rashmi back. And many of you know Chip Goins, who's longstanding engaged person in the community, and we're excited to have him here, and always kind of helping us with his expertise, and Claire DeMarco, who I know is heavily engaged as well. So it's exciting to see Rashmi, Chip, and Claire, in addition to the team that'll be presenting. And I'll let the team that kind of worked on the proposal or on the presentation introduce the rest if they're not all speaking. As many of you know, Harvard was at, so preview, okay? We haven't actually updated the infrastructure yet. So I hope that's not disappointing. But the goal of this visit, it's at least one of two visits we'll make. One is to kind of let you know at the early stage what we're planning and how far we've come, and get some feedback in the early stages. And then as we progress, we want to keep you informed, and hopefully when we get towards some of the endpoints of some of the phases, we'll come back and show more as if you all kind of want to see it and hear about it. But just a little bit quick context. Of course, Harvard is quite an early adopter of IIIF, and has deployed it across the enterprise, not only the libraries, but also the museums. Harvard X, the Academic Technology Group, has an integration with Canvas. So Harvard is a happy and prolific user of IIIF. But as an early adopter, some things happen. We accumulate some technical debt. The technology ages a bit. The standards evolve, as does the technology that is based on the standards. The uses and use cases evolve, and all the amazing work that you all have done happens, and we have lots we can learn from and build from. So we have kind of two high-level goals, let's say three, of kind of rebuilding or modernizing our infrastructure. And one is, in fact, to pay off some of that technical debt and modernize the technology. There's a lot that's happened, and our technology is aging. We're not afraid to admit it. It's really successful. It works really well, but it's time for a refresh. The second is really to enable the future with all these creative uses of Harvard content at Harvard and across the world. And I think this leads to the third, is that the Harvard Library and Harvard generally is really doubling down on our commitment to access and open access. And especially in these circumstances, we know that Harvard folks are more and more reliant on the content, the digital content, especially the media content, as are scholars from around the world. And we, Harvard folks, kind of derive a lot of benefit from the content that you all have made available in your environments or repositories, and we want to be good as citizens and members of that community and make the content that we can make available as available and usable as possible. So those are kind of some of the high-level goals. So again, we're here to kind of keep you informed, get your feedback, stay engaged in the community, and just kind of let you know what we're planning. So thanks for having us, and I'm going to hand it over to Vitaly and the rest of the team to give you the details.
Hello, everybody. I'm Vitaly Zakuta, and I'm a project manager for the IIIF Redesign project at Harvard. I'm going to talk a bit about the project and the project structure. On our first slide, you see what used to be called the Big Dig. This is from 2006. And there was a big project to redesign the expressway that used to go through the downtown Boston. So this slide is representing that we are in the midst of the redesign. When we come back for telling everybody what we accomplished, we'll have a slide of what the downtown Boston looks like now, which will represent our completed work. As Stu mentioned, our history of IIIF at Harvard is long. Back in the year 2000, in the deep depths of history, we had our first digital repository service implemented for preservation of images. Then in 2015, we had our first IIIF implementation for page-turned image objects. Then we followed up in 2018 with still images, and we implemented IIIF and Mirador 2 for our image delivery and display. We have a large amount of assets. We have over 7 million digital objects at Harvard. Lots of those are images, but we also have AV, audio and video. So why are we doing the redesign? Stu talked about this a little bit, but basically we've been seeing an increased use of our collections, and especially because of the COVID pandemic where everybody went remote, everybody heavily depended on remote access to our collections, students and faculty and librarians. So we've been seeing a lot of increased use. We also have wanted to modernize our IIIF infrastructure and bring it in compliance with the newest standards, with version 3.0 of the IIIF manifests and Mirador 3. We also wanted to support multi-tenant infrastructure. Right now, our infrastructure supports the library, but we have other stakeholders at the university. We have museums. We have a technology department that supports academic courses. We also have Harvard X, which supports edX and MOOCs. So all of these folks are using some of our infrastructure now, but also have their own installations. And as a result of this project, we would like to have central infrastructure that can be used by all of these stakeholders. Another important area that we want to address is to decouple delivery of assets from our preservation repository. When it was originally designed, again, back 20 years ago, they had both preservation copies and delivery copies live in one place, in one storage. What they're doing now is moving all delivery assets to a separate layer in Amazon AWS. And this is to both have separate delivery layer from preservation layer, and also to support increased use and being able to scale up using Amazon web services or any other web services that we might move into in the future. And also, last but not least, we wanted to resolve the performance issues that came up when in March we had seen our use skyrocket, and we wanted to make sure that our uptime is better and we are resilient and performant. We have an elevator pitch for this project that I'm going to read out, and you can also look at the slide. As the use of Harvard's digital content continues to grow, the IIIF Infrastructure Design Project will enable current and prospective users to access these resources quickly, reliably, and deliver them with the latest IIIF tools. This project will also enable our stakeholders to utilize our centralized infrastructure so they do not have to maintain their own. Our project structure is using Agile Scaled Scrum program. We have been using Agile in our department for a while, but we have taken an opportunity with this project to start an Agile Scaled Scrum pilot, which is basically a step up from being Agile for one team. We have 2 active teams working in sync, and we have a Scrum Master for each team, and I am, as a project manager, also a manager and a Scrum Master of the Scaled Scrum program. We have daily stand-ups, we have weekly stand-up for team leads, We populate backlogs and do sprint planning, we do sprint retrospective, and we are committed to doing open demos for every sprint that are open to our staff and stakeholders and to larger community, including IIIF community. We record these demos and they're available to public. Later in the project, we're going to spin up a third team, which will be implementing the IIIF viewer based on Mirador 3. I'm going to pass the presenting duties over to Vanessa Venti, which will present the next portion of our presentation.
Thanks, Vitaly. Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Venti, and I'm the product owner on the IIIF services team. And I'm going to be talking about our work from the stakeholders' perspective. And so, as you can imagine, at Harvard, we have a very broad user base for our IIIF resources. And we also have a lot of interested parties in this project that includes the Harvard Library Leadership Team, the Harvard IIIF Advisory Group, and as well as of course, our peer institutions and communities such as this one. And the dark and light green bubbles in the middle of the slide are the teams that are doing this work. And so so the grayed out one sort of at the bottom, the lighter one, that's a future team, but the three bubbles that are darker are the current teams that we're talking about right now. And so these teams are made up of people in the Library Technology Services group, which they are part of the broader Harvard IT community, but they serve the libraries. And particularly of note on this slide, we wanted to point out the stakeholders who Vitaly talked about a little bit a moment ago, which are the Academic Technology Group, who provide the digital tools to support faculty and students in teaching and learning, Harvard X, who create our massive online open courses, and the Harvard Art Museums. And so currently each of those stakeholders maintain their own IIIF infrastructure. They use our resources and reuse them, and also have their own assets that they will then create new manifests to maintain. And so we, as we were saying, a big component is to make it so that they will not have to maintain their own infrastructure separately, and can instead take advantage of a centralized infrastructure. So next slide, please, Vitaly. So this project is going to have a phased approach. And what's important to note here is in this phase, we're not working on any UIs, and instead we're really focused on back-end work, such as developing APIs and creating image servers and the ingest pipelines to make it all work. So we're really focused on delivering the assets quickly and reliably. The multi-tenant support, of course, is a huge focus where we know in particular we need to support both versions 2.1 and 3.0. We'll know right away that our stakeholders will continue to need 2.1 for Mirador 2, as well as needing it for annotation support. But we'll, we currently are only supporting 2.1, but in this implementation, we'll be adding support for 3.0, which we know, is the future of where all the new cool tools and development work will be happening. So stakeholders will be able to utilize both of those versions in this upgrade. Also important are providing a stable and persistent IIIF unique identifiers, And we also have a couple stretch goals. One is to add descriptive metadata to our manifest, which currently we do not have. And then another is to implement full text search and display in IIIF. And next slide, please, Vitaly. And so we know we will have future phases to this work. The next one we know for sure will be implementing Mirador 3. So I folded that one because that's sort of the only sort of kind of known phase. And then there's a list here of a bunch of things that we know are sort of on our radar. For a future phase beyond that, such as like Harvard Library providing annotation tools, digital lending, delivery of AV resources, and eventually 3D resources, the ability for users to download the highest res version of an asset, support for right to left viewing and exporting of resources as collection as data. So next I'm gonna pass it on to Katie, who's gonna talk about the technical aspects at a high level.
All right, thanks Vanessa. So I'm Katie Amaral. I am the Scrum Master for the asset team, and I'm also a developer. So I'm going to be giving just a broad overview of the guiding principles that are guiding our architecture design. Starting off with separation of concerns, isolating business logic into these modular components, which are easier to maintain, avoid repetition, avoid overlapping implementation of the same functionality. We also have the single responsibility principle. So a module or service has a single responsibility, and avoiding kind of these monolith modules and components. And we also have a principle of least knowledge, which is encapsulation of implementation details, which achieves low coupling. So a component should have the least amount of knowledge about implementation details as possible to avoid tightly coupled interdependencies and make things just more easy to manage and maintain. So next slide. So the reason why I bring up those architecture principles is because we decided upon a microservices model. So essentially that is just the idea of creating small modular components that have single responsibilities, that use APIs to communicate with each other and abstract away the specific implementation details of specific components. And that makes it easier to maintain, easier to swap out a specific component without breaking changes to other components. And we've got some examples here of some microservices. The asset lookup is a single microservice that's responsible just for lookup. So it's a completely contained microservice. It has its own repository. It's got its own image. It's basically a standalone service. And its only responsibility is to translate a URL to a IIIF URL to find the image location. Similarly, we have an authentication app. It's just a single self-contained microservice that's responsible for granting tokens. And we also have a converter service that's a single microservice responsible for converting manifests. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the next slide. So Vitaly, if you can move to the next slide. We have some highlights here regarding some of the major accomplishments that we've made so far. It's still fairly early in the project, but we just wanted to highlight these microservices and specifications here that we've worked on so far. So far we've developed a specification for how we're going to achieve our persistent identifiers for assets, which involves URNs and in some cases file IDs. We've started on the authentication app, which is now granting tokens. We've started the schema and implementation of the asset database, and we populated it with some example data to use for our lookups. We have our image server spun up and ready to go. We have a image built for that. And we have an asset lookup service, as I mentioned before, which uses the image server to find the asset location. So next slide. A few more highlights, and some of these will be very interesting to the community. Specifically, we have a manifest validator microservice, which has an API, which allows sending an API request with a manifest, and the service can identify any issues with the schema and can report back whether the schema is a valid manifest or not. And this, as I mentioned, is going to be contributed back to the community as an open source contribution. Similarly, we have a microservice for manifest converter, and our development team has added full support for version 3. So that will be contributed back to the open source community. We've also made significant progress on an administration API to ingest manifests. And we also have a presentation API for optimized delivery of IIIF manifests and collections. So those are some of the main highlights that we've been working on so far. Vitaly, if you want to move to the next slide. And then this slide just provides a quick overview of some of the technologies that we're using. As mentioned, in a microservices model, our technical specifications are being analyzed individually for each component. So the components don't have to use the same technologies, and our analysis considers the advantages and disadvantages of each technology on a per component basis individually. So we made a list of languages and frameworks and technologies to choose from, and we're analyzing each component individually and selecting the language or framework or tool based on the strengths and weaknesses that pertain specifically to that component. So we're using Python with the Flask framework, JavaScript with Node.js. For our infrastructure work, we're using Docker with Ansible for our deployments, and we selected Cantaloupe for our image server. Some other technologies, we're using Redis for caching and Postgres for a database. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up the quick high-level technical overview. So at this point, we're going to open it up to any questions. And you can also follow that link to check out some of our documentation that we have available.
This is Stefano from the Getty. So when you get past the first phase of implementation, would you be interested in kind of extracting little implementation stories and share them as cookbook recipes? I think they would be extremely interesting for the community.
Sure. So in terms of our specifications, in terms of our technical specifications, or more on the use case side?
Well, I see that, some institutions might benefit from knowing how you tackle like high volume, or, how deploy how you deploy an infrastructure that sustains a certain volume, or even how your conversion pipelines work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Once we have kind of more formalized specifications, we're definitely planning to share that with a wider community. And speaking of which, we did reference some of the Getty specifications in our analysis as well. So we'll be more than glad to contribute back.
Thanks.
And thank you, Stefano, for that paper. It's really helpful.
Definitely.
One way in which we've benefited greatly from the community. I should also note, before we get into other questions, there was a phase 0 of the project. And I noticed Tom's on the call. Crane, we did engage with Vicary to help us do some some kind of an environmental scan of our at Harvard and kind of do some architectural design. So you know, that was kind of a big help for us to kind of kick all this off and set a good foundation for moving forward. So kind of drawing on you all quite a bit already.
Absolutely.
Robert, I think, has his hand up.
Yeah, quite fascinating and a big project. It seems a detailed question, because you mentioned that you will be providing both IIIF 2.1 and 3.0 version metadata manifests and other things, and you also mentioned annotations. So if you have annotations, are you going to convert them into both? So into old style annotations and new style annotations, or are you, because yeah, I think Mirador will even take 3.0 annotations on 2.1 manifests.
I'm actually not sure on that one, but I will definitely bring that question back to the development team. But that's a great question.
I can
yeah, so if you develop some kind of framework of converting or having a, well, a non-specific annotation storage scheme, that then you can render in both standards. So I think this will be useful for the whole community.
Yeah, and it would be API based. Vanessa, were you going to add some info?
I was just going to add that we're supporting converting from 2.1 to 3, but not down from 3 to 2.1.
I also wanted to add that for annotations, out of our major stakeholders, we have a couple of stakeholders that are using the older annotation standard that is compatible for 2.1. So we will continue to provide 2.1 in the foreseeable future. But as they and other stakeholders move to the new version of annotations, we'll definitely look into conversion options.
All that is to say that we haven't sorted out the architecture for our annotation kind of pipeline quite yet, but it's,
right,
as you said, Robert, it's complicated, but we're going to try to be as versatile as we can. And maybe that's something we can check in. We can A, get feedback from you all on, and B, check in with you all next time we kind of visit.
Yeah, because I just wrote as part of Mirador, because we wanted to use something with older annotations with the new Mirador. So I wrote some ad hoc JavaScript glue code to convert it from one to the other, which is not really pretty. So I was thinking that, yeah, maybe it would be useful to develop some kind of meta standard, so that when you store it and then you can, it's easier to generate both out of one agnostic, so to speak, standard, maybe then even for 4.0, than having to cross convert from one explicit standard to another.
Sure, definitely. And just to add to that, as mentioned, you know, that it would be completely API based, so you wouldn't have to, you know, use something that's part of a larger tool. It would be just a microservice that does that one function. It looks like we might have a question in the chat.
Thanks, Jack, for pointing us to that adapter. Other questions?
Maybe as other folks are coming up with poignant questions, maybe I'll just ask you, like, what's been the gnarliest maybe challenge, or, you know, like sticking point, or whatever it might be. I just, you know, it's really somewhat rare to see like these really large scale, in-depth, you know, thoughtful approaches to these things. And so I wonder if others could learn from, if there's been like one particular thing that has just been, I won't use the word nightmare, but in that category.
I think, well, from my point of view, the complexity is integrating with existing systems, because putting up a new IIIF implementation is a lot of work, but there is clarity there. There is less clarity once you get to integration.
Yeah, I mean, I think to follow Vitaly's point, I think the DRS, the digital repository system, this was on the slide, is 20 years old, and our current IIIF infrastructure is really kind of bundled into that really big, complicated, kind of long-standing system. So not only do we have, say, JPEG 2000s that are 20 years old or many years old, that maybe don't validate or don't work super well, but kind of the kind of decoupling, debundling of the abstracting everything away from that big system, because that system's going to change as well, but also staying compatible, with all of our current systems. I think that's kind of a high level challenge, because we have kind of a big long legacy with the DRS. So it's all the things that are kind of bundled into trying to modernize one bit of a much bigger system. So the abstracting of it out, I think, is, I don't want to speak, the team's been doing all the hard work, so I want to defer to them. But from my observations, that seems to kind of introduce the most complexity.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stu. And just to add to that, a big part of our major goal is to really generalize a lot of these services. So our asset ingest pipeline, we're designing it to be just a generalized kind of queue where multiple source systems can feed assets in, rather than being tightly coupled to specifically the DRS. So we're just, in the process of figuring out the best way to really generalize that. And it'll probably involve, obviously, APIs and queues and queue managers. And we also need to consider designing it in a way such that new tenants can connect into the asset ingest pipeline, without having to do a heavy lift on their side. So that's, a big part of what we're really trying to do is, and this kind of goes back a little bit to the architecture principles that I spoke about before, is really just generalizing these services in such a way where they're easy to maintain, easy to extend, and easy to add new tenants to what is essentially going to be a multi-tenant architecture for our asset ingest.
Right. So the DRS then becomes, you may have noticed in one of the slides it said reference implementation. So the DRS is kind of our reference implementation for a tenant, right? We're trying to build, it's a really kind of long-lived custom system that we're trying to build an abstract model around, so others can kind of start using the services. I think I saw, I don't want to single you out, Song, you raised your hand and you lowered it. Was that, did you want to?
Oh, I think, yeah, you just answered most of it. I was going to ask, I noticed art museums on the tenant and stakeholder list, so I was wondering if your basic approach is whether house everything in the library side, or having their technology department more or less independent and utilize the API. And in recruiting the new tenants, are you facing any problem of whether educating them or coordinating about the protocols?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it and then let others from the team also chime in. Just at a high level, I know that, and I don't think Jeff Stewart, who many of you are familiar with, who's the head of the technology for the Harvard Art Museum. I don't think Jeff is here, but yeah, we've had this interesting conversation because in fact, Song, the Art Museum is one of these kind of stakeholders that was referred to that actually really heavily leans on DRS. So they actually use the pipeline where they deposit their content to DRS, and then they they use the image assets that come out of the ERS, although I know Jeff and his team, you know, like they build custom manifests, they use kind of AI to do some tagging. So on the asset management side, they probably wouldn't spin up a new tenant. However, on the Harvard X, and maybe Rashmi can speak to this or not, you know, and the academic technology side, you know, those groups do maintain their own asset management environment, their own images that aren't going to go into our preservation repository. So, you know, and in terms of kind of education, well, we don't need to educate, you know, we've got really strong partners who maybe know this more than we do, you know, about IIIF to work with. And so we're lucky in that, but, you know, it remained to be seen. I think the documentation of the APIs and the reference implementation, you know, we're pretty confident, and we're keeping these folks kind of plugged in as we go, pretty confident that, you know, we're not going to build it in a way that they can't do it, right? It's a kind of a core requirement of the project. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if others want to add.
Yes, thank you.
Stu, it's Claire. I just wanted to jump in and say, I think there's also something that other folks might like to do, which is to diversify the team and who's participating. And part of your scaled Scrum approach is that you've been able to bring in people who weren't familiar, making it an educational opportunity, and also to bring in Vanessa as product owner of the services team as someone with that finger on the pulse of the stakeholders. And sorry, there's mayhem happening behind me, but you get my point. So Vanessa, please feel free to share kind of, I think the whole community would be interested to know, when you're going out to these stakeholders and you're bringing people in, as someone who understands the user experience there, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's gonna, I think we're kind of just getting into the weeds a bit of, as Vitaly was mentioning, about the integration piece, where I think we're just kind of learning ourselves what is going to be needed to integrate with existing systems. So yeah, I think more on that to come. But yeah, that's like going to be a big upcoming component of what we'll be working on next for sure. So I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that right now, but maybe in like a month from now, I would have a better answer to that.
Other questions, comments? To Claire's point, we are kind of lucky to have a really strong team, and IIIF is such a core, because Harvard's a collecting institution. It's such a core kind of bit of infrastructure. And while I know that in the IIIF for Humans context, we want to kind of hide a little bit about IIIF, it's been great to be able to expand the kind of universe of expertise and engagement on this, and the community and the emergence of the 3.0 spec and the build out of Mirador 3, and have created a good moment for us to, and our own aspirations to modernize our infrastructure have really given us a good moment to expand that circle. So I appreciate Claire raising that, and her team being a really core component of that. Other ideas, thoughts, recommendations for us? What are we missing? What are we not thinking about? What are the major, I know this is a candid community. What are we missing? Give us advice.
I did think of one more thing to add to the integration piece, which is like, from my perspective, because I'm also like a stakeholder of some of those systems that will need to update. So I'm actually like really excited that we get to do some work to develop those, those other systems to get them more in line with IIIF. So I mean, yes, it's going to be, you know, it's a more development work to happen, but like something we were really hoping was going to happen anyway. So I think we're just excited that opportunity, it kind of forces it to happen sooner than it would have otherwise.
I also wanted to add that as part of our Scale Scrum and spin in multiple teams that are all in, they're also expanding our IIIF expertise in the department, because previously, with the previous installations, we had one great person who is on the call, I'm not going to name names, who was our IIIF Go person. So now expanding that knowledge to multiple members of multiple teams is also a great asset for the future.
All right. Well, thanks. If there's no other questions, you know, we don't have to drag this out painfully and needlessly. We appreciate you all inviting us. You know, thanks to the team for a great presentation, and thanks for having us. And thank you, Meg, for reaching out and inviting us to keep the community plugged into what we're hoping to accomplish. And maybe we'll be able to come back some other time to show you how you know, give a progress check.
That would be great. Yeah, we would love to do that. Thank you guys for putting in the time and the effort. It was really great to learn about what you're working on. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. It was really great to see so many people and to see so many good questions. And we will put the recording in the meeting notes document. So if there's anything that anyone on the call wants to go back to, if you missed something that you want to take notes on, etc., it'll just be in there in a couple hours, just because it takes a little while for Zoom to process it, as we're all probably familiar with at this point. So thank you all so much, and we hope to see you on the next call in 2 weeks. Right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.